My mother-in-law, Vera, just served Thanksgiving dinner to 23 family members, making sure everyone had full plates of turkey, stuffing, and all the fixings. Everyone except my 2 children. I watched in complete disbelief as my 7-year-old son, Colton, and 5-year-old daughter, Mabel, sat there with empty white plates in front of them while their cousins dug into their feast. The smell of gravy and buttered rolls filled the room, but my kids weren't allowed to have a single bite. "Ungrateful children don't deserve food," Vera announced to the entire family, her voice carrying that particular tone of righteousness she'd perfected over the years. "Perhaps missing one meal will teach them the importance of respecting their elders and showing up when family calls." My husband Preston, Vera's own son, sat frozen in his chair. His brother Deacon actually laughed out loud, pointing his fork at my children. "Maybe they'll finally learn some respect now, right, Mom? Can't coddle them forever." Other family members nodded along, like this was perfectly reasonable. My sister-in-law Ruth murmured something about children today while helping herself to more sweet potatoes. Not a single person at that table of 23 stood up for my babies. That's when my quiet little Colton, the child who usually barely spoke at family gatherings, slowly pushed back his chair and stood up. His small voice cut through the dining room chatter like a knife. "Grandma, should I show everyone the photos you made me take?" The entire table went dead silent. Vera's face transformed from smug satisfaction to something I'd never seen before, pure fear. And in that moment, I realized my 7-year-old son was about to expose something that would destroy our family as we knew it. My name is Shelby, and what happened next at that Thanksgiving dinner table changed everything about how I see family, trust, and the dangerous secrets grandparents sometimes keep. The drive to Vera's house that Thanksgiving morning had been perfect. Colton and Mabel sang songs in the back seat while Preston drove, and I carefully balanced the homemade pumpkin pie on my lap. We'd spent the previous evening making it together, the kids taking turns stirring the filling and sneaking tastes of whipped cream. Mabel had insisted on making a leaf pattern with the crust, and while it looked more like abstract art than autumn foliage, I was proud of their effort. "Remember, best behavior at Grandma's house," Preston said as we pulled into the circular driveway of his childhood home. The colonial-style house stood imposing against the gray November sky, its white columns and black shutters as pristine as always. Vera took immense pride in appearances, from her perfectly manicured lawn to the seasonal wreaths that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "We know, Dad," Colton replied quietly, already straightening his little bow tie. I'd dressed both kids in their Thanksgiving best, Colton in khakis and a navy sweater vest, Mabel in a burgundy dress with tiny flowers embroidered on the collar. Vera always noticed these things, and I'd learned over 8 years of marriage that making the wrong impression could sour an entire visit. The moment we stepped onto the porch, the door swung open. Vera stood there in her hostess uniform, pearl necklace, pressed burgundy blouse, black slacks that never seemed to wrinkle, and an apron that looked like it had never actually seen a spill. Her silver hair was styled in the same bob she'd worn since I'd met her, not a strand out of place despite supposedly cooking since dawn. "Finally," she said, glancing at her watch, even though we were 15 minutes early. "Everyone else is already here. Children, shoes off immediately. I just had the floors cleaned." Colton and Mabel quickly removed their dress shoes, placing them neatly by the door. I noticed at least a dozen other pairs scattered haphazardly, but said nothing. Different rules always seemed to apply to my children in this house. "Mom, you didn't need to cook everything yourself," Preston said, kissing her cheek. Shelby offered to bring sides. Vera's eyes landed on the pie in my hands. "Oh, how thoughtful. Homemade, I see. Well, we'll see if there's room on the dessert table. I did order 3 pies from that French bakery downtown. You know, the one that won all those awards." I forced a smile. "The kids helped make this one. It's from your mother's recipe, actually, the one Preston loved growing up." Something flickered in Vera's expression, but she simply took the pie from my hands. "How nice. Children, your cousins are in the playroom. Don't touch the display cabinet." Colton took Mabel's hand and they walked toward the sounds of laughter and video games coming from down the hall. I watched them go, noting how Colton's shoulders tensed as soon as we entered this house. He'd been doing that more lately, ever since September. The house smelled like a magazine spread: turkey, rosemary, cinnamon, and that expensive candle Vera always burned during holidays. Preston's brother, Deacon, appeared from the living room, beer already in hand despite it being barely noon. "There's my baby brother." He clapped Preston on the back hard enough to make him stumble. Ruth's in the kitchen, helping Mom pretend she wants help. Dad's holding court in the den with the uncles, talking about his golf game. Harold's voice drifted from the den, warm and booming. I'd always liked Preston's father. Unlike Vera, he seemed genuinely happy to see everyone, remembering little details about our lives and asking real questions. Lately, though, Preston mentioned his dad seemed more tired, more withdrawn at family gatherings. "Shelby, don't just stand there," Vera called from the kitchen. "If you insist on helping, you can set the table. The good china, obviously. Place cards are on the sideboard." I made my way to the dining room, where the massive mahogany table had been extended with both leaves. 24 place settings. I counted the place cards as I arranged them. Aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins, Preston's godparents. Everyone who mattered to Vera would witness whatever performance she had planned for today. As I set each place with military precision, remembering Vera's exact specifications from previous dinners, I thought about the birthday incident 2 months ago. Mabel had been hospitalized with pneumonia, and we'd missed Vera's 68th birthday dinner. We'd called, sent flowers, had the kids make cards, but Vera's voice had been ice when she said she understood. I should have known she didn't. The table looked perfect when I finished. Crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier, silver polished to a mirror shine, cloth napkins folded into precise triangles. Everything exactly as Vera demanded. I had no idea that in less than an hour, this perfectly set table would become a battlefield, and my 7-year-old son would be the unexpected general who would finally stand up to the woman who'd controlled this family for decades. "Time for dinner." Vera's voice rang through the house with the authority of a ship's captain. Family members began streaming into the dining room from every corner of the house. Uncle Roger abandoned the football game mid-play, cousins thundered down the stairs, and Aunt Patricia emerged from the bathroom where she'd been touching up her lipstick for the 3rd time. I helped Colton and Mabel find their seats, noticing Vera had placed them at the far end of the table, separated from Preston and me. "Mom, why can't we sit with you?" Mabel whispered, her small fingers gripping my hand. "It's okay, sweetie. You're right next to Cousin Emma. You like Emma." I smoothed her hair and gave Colton an encouraging nod. He pulled out his sister's chair like the little gentleman I'd raised him to be. Vera stood at the head of the table, surveying her kingdom. Harold sat at the opposite end, looking slightly confused about the seating arrangement. Preston and I were placed in the middle sections, separated by various aunts and uncles I only saw twice a year. "Before we begin," Vera announced, lifting her wine glass, "I want to thank everyone for making time for family. Some of us understand that nothing is more important than showing up for those we love." Her eyes lingered on my children for a moment too long. My stomach tightened. She began serving with great ceremony, personally placing food on each plate rather than passing dishes around like normal families. "Uncle Roger, you get extra stuffing. I know it's your favorite. Patricia, light on the gravy, watching your figure. Deacon, double helping of turkey for my hardworking son." Everyone cooed and thanked her as she made her way around the table. She served Preston, then me, making comments about each dish. "Shelby, I gave you mostly vegetables. I know you're trying to be healthier these days." I wasn't, but I smiled anyway. When she reached Emma, sitting next to Mabel, she served the 8-year-old a beautiful plate. Then she walked past Mabel entirely and past Colton. "Mom?" Preston's voice cracked with confusion. Vera set down the serving spoon with deliberate precision. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. "Ungrateful children don't deserve food. They need to learn respect for their elders." My daughter's lower lip began trembling. Colton stared at his empty plate with an expression I'd never seen on his young face before. "Vera, what are you talking about?" My voice came out sharper than intended. "Your children missed my birthday dinner. They don't call me. They don't write thank you notes for gifts. They don't appreciate what this family provides." She returned to her seat with the grace of someone who'd just delivered a sermon. Perhaps hunger will teach them gratitude. "They had pneumonia." The words exploded from me. Mabel was in the hospital for 3 days. We sent flowers, we called. The kids made you cards. Deacon actually laughed, a harsh sound that made me want to throw my water glass at him. Maybe they'll learn respect now, right, Mom? You can't just skip Grandma's birthday. Exactly, Ruth chimed in, patting Deacon's arm. Children today don't understand sacrifice like Vera's generation did. Everything's too easy for them. They're 5 and 7 years old. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the hardwood. Shelby, please. Preston touched my arm. Let's not make a scene. I whirled on my husband. A scene? Your mother is refusing to feed our children. Maybe they could eat in the kitchen, Preston suggested weakly. Mom, surely they could have plates in the kitchen. Preston Michael Henderson, Vera's voice could have frozen fire. I am teaching your children a valuable lesson about family loyalty. Would you undermine that? Aunt Patricia nodded sagely. Sometimes tough love is necessary. When I was young, missing a meal was common punishment. This is insane, I said, looking around the table. All of you are just going to sit here and eat while 2 children starve? Starve is rather dramatic, Uncle Roger mumbled through a mouthful of turkey. It's 1 meal. Harold finally spoke up from the far end. Vera, dear, perhaps this is excessive. They're just children. Harold, you don't remember, but they missed my birthday. Vera's tone suggested the conversation was over. You were confused that day, remember? You kept asking where everyone was. I don't recall being confused, Harold said slowly. Of course you don't, dear. That's part of the problem. Vera took a delicate bite of cranberry sauce. Everyone, please eat. The food's getting cold. The room filled with the awkward sound of forks against plates. Some family members ate eagerly, apparently unbothered. Others picked at their food, avoiding eye contact. But everyone ate. Everyone except my 2 babies, who sat there, like orphaned children at a feast. I was about to grab my kids and leave when Colton's small, clear voice cut through the uncomfortable silence like a blade. Grandma, should I show everyone the photos you made me take? The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Vera's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. The piece of turkey fell back onto her plate with a soft plop that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. What photos, sweetheart? I asked, my maternal instincts immediately alert to something significant happening. Colton never spoke up at family gatherings, especially not to challenge adults. My son reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flip phone, the kind drug dealers used on TV shows. It definitely wasn't his. I'd never seen it before. The purple case was scratched and worn, like it had been hidden and retrieved many times. Put that away immediately. Vera's voice had changed completely. Gone was the righteous grandmother teaching a lesson. This was something else. This was fear. But Grandma, you said they were important, Colton continued, his voice steady in a way that made me proud and terrified simultaneously. You said I was being a special helper. Preston stood now, his confusion evident. Mom, what is he talking about? What photos? It's nothing. A silly game we play. Colton, put that phone away right now or there will be consequences. What kind of consequences? I asked, moving toward my son. What kind of games are you playing with my children without my knowledge? Mabel, sweet innocent Mabel, decided to contribute. It's the secret game, where Grandma gives us $20 each time if we take pictures and don't tell Mommy and Daddy. She said we're saving for college. The table erupted in confused murmurs. Deacon set down his beer hard enough to slosh liquid onto Vera's pristine tablecloth. Mom, what are they talking about? Children make up stories, Vera said, but her usual commanding presence was cracking. You know how imaginative they can be. These aren't stories, Colton said, scrolling through the phone with the expertise of someone who'd done it many times. You taught me how to use this phone. You said it was our special secret and that good grandchildren help their grandparents. Show me that phone. I reached for it, but Vera suddenly lunged across the table, knocking over a gravy boat in her desperation. That's private property. You have no right. Preston intercepted his mother's reach, gently but firmly holding her wrist. Mom, if it involves my children, it's not private. Colton, give me the phone. Colton walked around the table, avoiding his grandmother's increasingly frantic attempts to grab the device. He handed it to his father with the solemnity of someone passing over evidence. Preston opened the phone, his eyebrows furrowing as he began scrolling. "Mom, these are photos of pill bottles. Dozens of them." "Medications need to be documented," Vera said quickly. "For insurance purposes." I was teaching them responsibility. "By having them photograph Grandpa's medications without telling us?" I moved closer to Preston, looking at the screen. The images were methodical, each pill bottle photographed from multiple angles, showing the labels, the pill counts, the prescription dates. "There's more, Dad," Colton said quietly. "Keep going." Preston's face went pale as he continued scrolling. "These are bank statements, investment accounts, legal documents." "From Grandpa Harold's desk," Mabel added helpfully. "Grandma said we had to be super quiet and quick when he was napping. Like spies. She made it fun." Harold stood up shakily at the far end of the table. "My desk? Vera, you had the children going through my private papers?" "And the signatures," Colton added, his voice even smaller now, as if he was beginning to understand the gravity of what he was revealing. "She had us take pictures of Grandpa signing things, lots of pictures of his signature." Ruth gasped audibly. "Vera, that sounds like you were collecting signature samples." "Don't be ridiculous," Vera snapped, but her face had gone from red to ashen. "I was simply organizing our finances. Harold has been forgetful lately. Someone needs to manage things." "I haven't been forgetful," Harold said, his voice stronger now. "You keep telling everyone I'm forgetful, but I remember everything clearly, except when I take those new pills you give me. Then things get fuzzy." Preston was still scrolling, his expression growing more horrified. "Mom, there are photos here of Dad sleeping. Why would you have the children photograph Dad sleeping?" "To show how much he sleeps," Vera's voice pitched higher. "To document his decline. Someone has to be responsible." "She gave us special candy after," Mabel said. "The kind you don't let us have, Mommy. The sour ones that make our tongues blue. She said we earned them by being good helpers and keeping the secret." I felt my hands shaking with rage. "You bribed my babies to spy on their grandfather? You turned them into your personal surveillance system." "How long has this been going on?" Preston demanded. Colton looked at his shoes. "Since the summer. Since right after Grandpa's birthday party. Grandma said Grandpa needed our help, but grown-ups wouldn't understand." Preston's hands trembled as he continued scrolling through the phone. "Mom, this photo shows Dad's signature on a blank paper. Just his signature, nothing else on the page." "That's from last week," Colton said quietly. "Grandma said Grandpa was too tired to read the whole document, so she'd fill it in later to help him." Harold gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "Vera, what have you been having me sign?" "Nothing important, just household matters," Vera said, but her voice had lost all its authority. She looked smaller somehow, cornered. "These aren't household matters." Preston's voice rose as he found more photos. "This is a power of attorney document. Mom, you had the children photograph Dad signing power of attorney?" "And this one," Preston continued, his face going from pale to flushed with anger. "This is a quitclaim deed for the lake house. Dad, did you know you signed over the lake house?" "I never signed anything about the lake house." Harold moved toward Preston with surprising speed for his age. "Let me see that." The room erupted. Deacon grabbed the phone from Preston's hands, looking for himself. "Jesus Christ, Mom. These pills in the photos, I recognize some of these. Lorazepam, Ambien, Trazodone. These are all sedatives." "Your father needs help sleeping," Vera said weakly. 3 different sedatives?" Deacon scrolled frantically. "At these doses, Mom, this could kill him, or at least make him confused enough to sign anything." Ruth had gone to Harold's side, supporting him as he swayed slightly. "Harold, how long have you been taking all these medications?" "Since August," Harold said slowly. "Vera said the doctor prescribed them for my memory issues, but I didn't have memory issues until I started taking them." "Which doctor?" I demanded. "Which doctor prescribed these?" Vera lifted her chin defiantly. "Dr. Morrison understood the situation." "Dr. Morrison is your cousin," Aunt Patricia gasped. "The one who lost his license in Ohio and moved here." "He still has a license in this state," Vera snapped. Preston found more photos, each revelation worse than the last. "Mom, these are photos of Dad's investment portfolios, his retirement accounts. Everything's been documented. Kids, why did Grandma want all these photos?" Colton's bottom lip trembled. "She said Grandpa was sick and might forget where he put everything. She said we were helping make sure nothing got lost when he got more confused." "She made us practice," Mabel added, twirling her fork nervously. "Practice what to say if anyone asked us about Grandpa." "What did she tell you to say?" I knelt beside my daughter. "That Grandpa gets confused, that he forgets our names sometimes, that he sleeps a lot and doesn't remember things, but Grandpa always remembers my name. He remembers I like unicorns and that Colton likes dinosaurs." Harold's voice cracked. "I've never forgotten my grandchildren's names. Never." "But you told Dr. Hamilton you had," Vera said desperately. "At your last appointment." "You mean the appointment where you gave me 3 pills before we left and I could barely stay awake?" Harold's voice grew stronger with each word. "The appointment where you did all the talking while I sat there like a zombie?" Preston found something else on the phone that made him stagger backward. "Mom, this is a photo of a life insurance policy, a new one, taken out in September, for $5 million. Estate planning is responsible parenting," Vera said, but even she seemed to know how weak it sounded. "With you as the sole beneficiary." Preston's voice was deadly quiet. "Not your children, not your grandchildren, just you." "There are more signatures," Colton said, tears now running down his face. "Lots more. Grandma said I was doing such a good job. She said I was her special helper and that someday when Grandpa went to heaven, she'd make sure I got money for college because I helped protect the family." The sound Harold made was inhuman, a cry of betrayal that seemed to come from his soul. "Vera, we've been married 43 years. 43 years. And I've managed this family perfectly for all of them." Vera stood, trying to reclaim some dignity. "You were getting older, making mistakes. Someone had to take control before you gave everything away or got swindled. The only person swindling him was you," I shouted, unable to contain myself any longer. Deacon had his phone out now. "I'm calling 911. Dad needs to go to the hospital, get those drugs out of his system, and then we're calling the police." "Don't be dramatic," Vera said, but her hands were shaking now. "This is a family matter." "No, Mom," Preston said quietly. "This is elder abuse. This is fraud. This is attempted murder, considering those drug dosages." "And you used my children," I said, my voice raw with rage and hurt. "You turned my 7-year-old and 5-year-old into accomplices to your crimes." The paramedics arrived within 15 minutes, followed closely by 2 police officers. Harold's blood pressure was dangerously low, and the EMT confirmed that the combination of sedatives in his system could have been fatal if continued much longer. They took him to the hospital immediately, with Ruth riding along to provide support. Vera tried to maintain her composure as the officers questioned her, but her story kept changing. First, the medications were prescribed. Then they were necessary. Then Harold had agreed to them. Finally, she demanded a lawyer and refused to say anything more. The officers collected the phone as evidence, along with several prescription bottles from Vera's bathroom cabinet that Harold confirmed he'd never agreed to take. 2 weeks later, I sat in my own kitchen with Colton and Mabel, helping them process everything that had happened. The investigators had interviewed them gently, with a child psychologist present, and confirmed what we'd already suspected. Vera had been systematically drugging Harold since August, using the children to document his assets and collect signature samples. She'd already transferred nearly $200,000 to accounts only she controlled. "Mom, are we in trouble?" Colton asked, pushing his cereal around his bowl. "No, sweetheart. You did nothing wrong. You were incredibly brave to speak up when you did." "But Grandma said keeping secrets was part of being in a family," Mabel said softly. I pulled both my children close. "Listen to me carefully. No adult should ever ask you to keep secrets from Mommy and Daddy. Not for money, not for candy, not for any reason. Real love doesn't require secrets." Preston joined us at the table, looking exhausted. He'd spent the past 2 weeks helping his father untangle the financial mess and dealing with the criminal investigation. "Dad's doing better. The doctors say there's no permanent damage, thank God. The confusion and memory issues were entirely from the drugs." "What's going to happen to Grandma?" Colton asked. Preston sighed deeply. "She's facing charges for elder abuse, fraud, and forgery. The district attorney says she'll likely take a plea deal. Prison time is almost certain." The hardest part was explaining to the children that someone who was supposed to love them had used them as tools in a crime. We found them a wonderful therapist who specialized in helping children process family trauma. Slowly, they began to understand that what happened wasn't their fault. Harold moved in with us temporarily while he recovered, and the divorce proceedings began. One evening, he sat with Colton and Mabel, tears in his eyes. "You two saved my life. You know that, right? If you hadn't been brave enough to tell the truth, Grandma might have succeeded." "Were you really getting sick, Grandpa?" Mabel asked. "No, sweetheart. I was never sick. Grandma just wanted everyone to think I was so she could take control of our money." He hugged them both tightly. "But you two are heroes. You stood up to a bully, even though that bully was someone we all trusted." The family fractured in predictable ways. Deacon, horrified by his initial laughter at the Thanksgiving table, apologized profusely and became one of our strongest supporters. Some relatives sided with Vera, claiming we'd blown things out of proportion. We cut those people out of our lives without hesitation. 6 months later, at a much smaller Thanksgiving gathering, we sat around our own table. Harold was there, healthier than he'd been in years. Deacon and Ruth came with their kids. A few aunts and uncles who'd supported us through the ordeal joined us. It was quieter, simpler, but genuine. "What are you thankful for?" I asked Colton as we went around the table. He thought carefully. "I'm thankful that telling the truth is always right, even when it's scary." Mabel added, "I'm thankful that Grandpa is better and that we don't have to keep secrets anymore." The investigation revealed that Vera had been planning this for over a year, researching Harold's assets, connecting with her disgraced cousin for the prescriptions, and waiting for the right opportunity. She'd chosen my children specifically because she knew they were young enough to manipulate, but old enough to operate a phone camera. The lesson we learned as a family went beyond just watching for elder abuse or financial crimes. It was about the insidious nature of family manipulation, how someone can weaponize love and loyalty against the very people they claim to protect. Vera had counted on family politeness, on the reluctance to make scenes, on the assumption that grandmothers always act in good faith. But she hadn't counted on a 7-year-old boy's courage to stand up when he saw his little sister about to cry over an empty plate. Sometimes, heroes come in the smallest packages, wearing bow ties and carrying secrets they're finally brave enough to share. If you found value in this story, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your comments about your own family experiences help build our community of support. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that remind us all to trust our instincts and protect those we love.